Marcia is the CEO of the Women's Fund of Rhode Island, and it's amazing to be out in Rhode Island.
Pleasure to be with all of you tonight. So my job is to sort of weave together all the presentations that you've heard tonight from our distinguished panel here, and to leave you yet with a little bit more food for thought. So as I sat in the last few days and thought about my remarks for you, to reflect on some of the themes that were going to be shared tonight, it became really clear that by the end of the night I would bring us full circle, because Karen started out sharing with us your voice, actually, telling us what you thought about equal pay, and what you thought about women's representation at work, and what you thought about work-family balance, and among many other things that impact workplace stress and our individual health, as well as organizational health. And then Susan jumped in and she shared with us gender dynamics in the workplace across Rhode Island and in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors. And, you know, in short, you in the health sector are experiencing what we in the nonprofit and for-profit sectors are experiencing, which is exactly what you identified: a lack of representation, pay inequity, lack of representation at the board and C-suite. We're all stuck in entry and middle level positions. We're not moving forward very quickly. Wage inequity and differences in how we're preparing men and how we prepare women to lead at all ages. It starts young. So, and then Judith shared with us strategies and tactics for dealing with stress that we experience in the workplace, and I thank you for your reference to Brene Brown. She's one of my favorite people. I follow her all the time. If you haven't seen her TED Talk, I highly recommend it. And I so appreciate your message and her message, which is that we are enough. We are always enough, even in a workplace that demands more and more and more from us. So we must learn, and in my case, daily relearn, how to provide self-care on an emotional level, on a physical level, and on a spiritual level, however you define that. But here's the thing. Right now, women are being encouraged to lean in. And though I very much appreciate Sheryl Sandberg's work, and I appreciate her stepping into this space, I also have to tell you very truthfully that you can lean as far in as you want and smack your head into a brick wall. And that's the truth. And so it's not just about leaning in. Absolutely, there are things that we can do to promote ourselves, to advance ourselves, to expand who we are in the workplace, but there's also lots of things that are there, that are institutional, that are cultural, that are systemic, that are rooted deeply, and that keep you, and keep me, and keep women from advancing. And so not only do we need to lean in, but we have to lean on policymakers to really make policies that shift workplace culture and workforce culture. So, and just quickly, why do women have to lean in and men don't? Right? And that's why I love this. It's like, how are men supposed to be leaning in? How come we're not talking about the lean-in generation for men? And we're constantly saying, this is what women have to do, this is what women have to do, this is what women have to do. Where's the conversation about what men have to do? And the balance that men need in the workplace, and the balance that men need in terms of stress and family responsibility. And when and where are we going to change the paradigm that says that caregiving is everyone's responsibility, not just a woman's responsibility? So then Susan also touched on tonight, speaking about gender dynamics in the workplace and workplace policies that are both formal and informal. And I've heard Susan speak about this many times, and the formal mentoring versus the informal mentoring that happens in workplaces is something to really pay attention to, because it's happening whether you think it's happening or not. And more often than not, under the screen or behind the screen is the mentoring that men are getting on the business acumen. So it's happening. But as she pointed out, there are strategies and tactics that you can use to go to your HR departments and to talk about ways that you can advance women's leadership, ways that you can do wage equity audits. But in truth, we need to go way beyond this. Because, as I've already said, the barriers we experience are there. They're institutional, they're cultural, and they're systemic. So the work that I do and the work that the Women's Fund of Rhode Island does calls on both men and women to lean in and to lean on policymakers to make change that's real, to make shifts in culture, and to remove the systemic barriers that will pave the way for real gender equality. So that we have workplace policies and workforce practices that engage all men and women in work-life balance. Because when we have that, we're going to have better individual health, we're going to have better family health, we're going to have better community health, and our state will be healthier mentally, emotionally, and economically. So you and I both know that a woman's health has a huge impact on her family's well-being. A woman's economic security also has a huge impact on her family's well-being. And when she is healthy and when she is economically secure, so is her family, so is her community, and again, so will the state go. So if our health and well-being, both physically and financially, is tied to where we work, then the truth of the matter is we leave far more women and men out of access to security, far more families out of access to security. Because what you have today in your workplace can be gone tomorrow if you're in a new workplace. So it isn't just you, and it isn't just the workplace, it's the systemic issues that keep us from advancing as a society. So working for and working on statewide policies levels the playing field for you, for me, and for the clients that you serve. Two summers ago, I had the great privilege of traveling through Scandinavia. I was in Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Estonia for the entire summer as a Rhode Island Foundation Fellow. And my goal and my aim there was to figure out what the heck they were doing that we weren't doing here that made them the top countries. Those are some of the top countries in the world according to the World Economic Forum for women. And so I wanted to learn best practices and policies, and I did learn many, many things while I was there, not only from meetings with prime ministers and politicians and leaders across these countries for gender equality, but also from the everyday conversations I had hanging out at the pub and checking out the scene and walking and shopping and just, trying to be with the locals. So in addition to coming to terms with the fact that Rhode Island wasn't just 5 or 10 years behind like I thought it was going over there, that we were actually about 4.5 decades behind these Scandinavian countries, I realized that there was this belief that I had held, and actually that there's a belief that is shared broadly in this part of the world, in the United States, that says that culture is what dictates public policy. But in truth, that's not the case. In Scandinavia, like here in Rhode Island, not everyone is a socialist, not everyone is a feminist, not everyone is any type of homogeneous demographic that you can conjure up. But that's what we tell ourselves. Well, they're all alike, and so it's really easy because they just all agree anyway, and so this is why they have these great policies, where in fact, I encountered probably the most sexist individual in my entire career. I was sure my board had planted, one of those candid cameras, and they were videotaping me to see how I would deal with it, because everything that you can think of was coming out of this guy's mouth, and I'm the only person sitting there, and I figured, why me? I'm sitting here, I'm reading a book, I'm not, and here you are. So, the idea that, public policy happens because the culture is amenable to it is out of date. And it's out of touch. And what I have learned is that the policy that they have passed has brought important changes to the work and life balance that these countries experience. And as a result, culture is shifting. So policy impacts and shapes culture. And I got to see and hear that firsthand, and I'll share a few of those stories in a moment. So I was thinking about change, and one of my friends, my dear friend, she says this to me all the time, Marcia, nothing changes if nothing changes. And the first time she said it to me, I was like, well, duh. And I was like, oh, right. Nothing changes if nothing changes, and yet we keep doing the same stuff over and over and over again, right? That's the Einstein quote, right? Do the same thing over and over and over again. That's the definition of insanity, if you're expecting a different outcome. Right? And so I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, here I'm with all these people who do clinical work, and so here's this model of, stages of change, and then here's a systemic model of stages of change, and, in truth, Rhode Island is stuck in this pre-contemplative state. I don't know, we have a problem, I'm not sure. Maybe, oh, well, they're a little tired, but, they're just complaining, and there's not really anything that can be done. It costs too much. We hear that all the time. So, despite the fact that Rhode Island has changed and the United States has changed considerably in the last 40 years, in fact, there are more women today than ever before in our history in the workforce. And in fact, you've seen the numbers in all the studies, there are more women who are primary breadwinners in the family than ever before. Yet, our policies have not kept pace with what's been happening in the workplace. Quite the opposite. So we have a 1950s June and Beaver